There and Back Again. A Hobbit Story by Bilbo Baggins. Chapter 2. Roast Mutton. Please like and subscribe for second breakfast. I woke with the ugly kind of lateness that has no excuse and offers no mercy. Sunlight had already climbed the round windows and spilled itself across my rug like melted butter, warm, smug, completely certain the day belonged to it. Bag End was a house that liked order. It liked routine. It liked its mornings crisp and proper, cattle first, then toast, then a quiet moment to remember that the world could be kept at bay with a locked door and a well-stocked pantry. This morning had slipped the leash. For a few breaths I lay still, listening for the homely sounds that made a hole feel safe. The soft settling of beams, the faint tick of the clock, the whisper of a draught in the hall. Instead, there was only silence. Not a pleasant silence. Not the comfortable hush of a house that has finished its chores and is pleased with itself. This was the wrong kind. Like a pause in a conversation just before someone says your name. I threw back the covers and padded into the hall in my dressing gown, hair wild, feet bare on cool plank. The sitting room looked like the aftermath of a respectable invasion. Crumbs in the corners, mugs abandoned on surfaces that deserved better. My best plates stacked in a way that suggested someone had tried to be helpful and failed with enthusiasm. They were gone. Every last dwarf. I stood there blinking, half hoping the whole affair had been some over-rich dream brought on by wine and too much seed cake. 13 dwarves, a wizard, my pantry emptied like a besieged cellar. But Bag End remembers. The air held smoke and meat and strangers. My spoons were in the wrong drawer. My chairs sat at odd angles like men who had risen too quickly. Then I heard something in the pantry. I approached as one approaches a dog one does not know. Slowly, careful to keep my fear from showing in my shoulders. The pantry door was ajar. Inside, among sacks of flour, jars of pickles, and the honest comforts of preserves, sat Gandalf the Grey, as if wizards belonged there. He had a kettle on and a look of mild amusement, like a man who has watched a cat steal a fish and is pleased by the cat's initiative. He glanced up as if I had merely stepped out for a moment and returned. "There you are," he said. "There I am," I echoed. "Where are they?" "Gone on," he replied, pouring tea as if "gone on" explained 13 dwarves vanishing from my home before breakfast. He fished a folded letter from somewhere within his cloak and held it out between 2 long fingers. "They left you this." I took it like it might bite. The handwriting was heavy, angular, impatient. "We are at the Green Dragon. We leave shortly. Burglar expected." A few more lines followed, small jabs about punctuality and breakfast and the inconvenience of hobbits, as if the whole world existed to test a dwarf's temper. My indignation rose, then faltered under the sheer audacity of it. Expected. As if I were a parcel. "I never agreed," I said, and heard how thin it sounded, even to me. Gandalf sipped his tea. "No," he said, "you didn't." That was worse. If he had argued, I could have wrapped myself in outrage like a cloak. His calm left me naked. I should have sat down. I should have eaten a proper breakfast. I should have told myself that last night had been a foolishness, and that today would be about cleaning up and restoring my life to its rightful shape. Instead, my feet moved. Not quickly at first, not boldly, more as if some stubborn took-bone in me had stood up and started walking, and the Baggins part of me, shocked and appalled, could only hurry along behind it so it wouldn't be left alone in the house with the consequences. I grabbed what I could in a daze, then remembered I had forgotten nearly everything. No handkerchief, no hat, no walking stick, no sense. The moment I realized it, my chest tightened with the ridiculous grief of it, as if the absence of a handkerchief proved, beyond argument, that I was not meant for roads and danger and whatever lay beyond the tidy hills of the Shire. Gandalf watched me flounder for a moment, then rose and placed a bundle in my arms. My bundle, neatly packed, as if someone had rifled my drawers with intimate knowledge and no shame. I stared at it. How? One does not send a hobbit into the wild with nothing but panic and a dressing gown, he said. You'll want more than breakfast regrets. I am not, I began, but my body had already chosen. I was out the door and down the path, heart hammering like a rabbit in a trap, running as if the Shire itself were trying to tug me back by the collar. The hill's air bit my cheeks with cold cheer. Birds sang as if nothing wicked had ever happened under the sun. Neighbours stared. Someone called my name in that tone people use when they intend to repeat the story later. I did not answer. If I answered, I might stop. If I stopped, I might think. If I thought, I might turn back. The green dragon's sign creaked in the wind, painted green and gold, smug as a coin newly polished. The dwarves were gathered by the stables in a knot of cloaks and beards and restlessness. Ponies stamped and snorted, packs hung heavy from their sides. Thorin saw me first. His brows lifted, and in that flicker of surprise, I saw something almost human. Then it vanished behind the carved stone look he wore like armour. "Well," he said, "our burglar wakes at last." A cheer went up. Dwalin clapped me on the back hard enough to knock the breath out of me. Keely grinned like a boy who'd found a new game. Feely offered a hand up to a pony as if this were all settled and I belonged among them. My mouth opened to produce something dignified. What came out was, "I haven't got my handkerchief." For half a heartbeat they stared, then laughed as if I had delivered a jest in perfect timing. I did not know whether to be offended or grateful, so I chose the only safe option and turned red. Gandalf arrived behind me at that moment as if he had been there all along, because, of course, he had. He spoke a few quiet words to the ponies, checked straps with an absent competence that irritated me, and then we were moving. Bag End fell behind. At first, I turned in the saddle again and again, watching the green roll of hills and hedges shrink as if my eyes could hook them and pull them back. I told myself I would turn back at the first proper road, the first respectable inn, the first moment my pride returned from wherever it had fled. But pride is a shy animal. It does not come when you call. It comes when it suits itself. We rode through fair country at first, the sort that smells of grass and safe fences. Then the land thinned, and the world grew broader. Inns grew rare, roads grew meaner. The sky grew larger, and I began to understand, slowly, unwillingly, that my front door was no longer the centre of anything. I complained, naturally. I complained about the pace, the dust, the way the pony's gait shook my bones as if they were loose stones in a purse. I complained about meals, about the lack of chairs, about the scandalous absence of clean linen. I complained about sleeping outdoors, where the earth breathes under your back, and the sky watches you like a great unblinking eye. The dwarves endured it the way mountains endure rain, silent, unmoved, amused in the depths. For a time, the weather behaved itself. Blue skies, mild winds, nights that smelled of heather and distant wood smoke. A month slid by with the dangerous softness of summer, and I almost began to believe that an adventure might be nothing but discomfort and sore thighs. Then the rain came. Not a polite rain that taps at your window and asks if you might like to stay in. This rain arrived like judgment. Cold, hard, relentless. It hammered our cloaks, turned the road to mud, turned fields to bog, turned my thoughts to misery. The pony's ears drooped, beards dripped. The world narrowed to wet fabric and grey sky. And somewhere in that grey, Gandalf vanished. No farewell, no warning. One moment his staff tapped ahead of us, steady as a clock. The next, there was only empty road, and the uneasy feeling that the strongest thing in our company had stepped away, leaving us with our own poor decisions. Thorin called a halt with a sharp gesture. "Where is he?" No one answered. Dwarves will grumble at a wizard and curse him under their breath, but when he is gone, the space he leaves is loud. We pushed on, because there was nothing else to do, until one pony suddenly shrieked and bolted, as if the very air had bitten it. It ran for the river, wild-eyed, the whites showing. The river itself had swollen with rain and roared brown and foaming, chewing at its banks like a hungry mouth. Fili and Kili, quick as young wolves, splashed after it and caught the reins just before it flung itself into the current. But the packs were not so lucky. A rope snapped, a bundle lurched, supplies tumbled into the flood and were gone, swallowed without even the courtesy of a splash you could curse at. We dragged the pony back, trembling. The dwarves spoke low, angry words in their own tongue. Rain ran down my face like tears I refused to admit to. "We'll make a fire," Owen declared, stubborn as any dwarf. Glóin helped him, crouched under a dripping pine, striking flint and steel until sparks leapt like tiny, desperate things and died on wet bark. Smoke rose in thin, mocking threads. No flame came. We huddled under trees that offered no true shelter, cold settling into joints and bones like an unwanted guest. It was then Balin climbed a rise to keep watch. When he returned, his beard was plastered to his chest and his eyes were narrowed. "There's a light," he said, pointing. "Over that hill." A light in such weather should have been comfort. Instead, it felt like a lure. Thorin's gaze slid to me like a blade. "Burglar." My stomach clenched. "Me?" "You," he said. "You are small, you are quiet, when you choose. Go and see what it is. If there is shelter, find it. If there is food, bring it." Harder to spot, my mind translated. Easier to catch. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to shout that this was not my job, that I was not a burglar, that I was a respectable hobbit who had misplaced his entire life for the sake of politeness and a wizard's mark on a door. But 13 pairs of eyes were on me. Pride, shy as it is, chose that moment to appear. So I went. Over the hill the rain eased as if the world itself leaned closer to listen. I saw the fire then, bright, crackling, real. and around it sat 3 shapes, hunched like boulders that had learned to sit. Trolls. I had heard of trolls all my life. In the Shire, trolls were what you used to frighten children into staying near the path. Great, ugly creatures, stupid as sacks, easily tricked by clever folk and good luck. These were not the gentle sort you tell in a nursery. These were huge enough to make a pony look like a toy. Their skin was rough and mottled, their arms thick as tree trunks. They squatted and argued over a sheep turning on a spit, fat dripping into the flames with a hiss. One of them complained about mutton yesterday and mutton today and likely mutton tomorrow, as if he'd been personally cheated by the world's menu. I should have fled. Instead, I did what fear and foolishness always make a person do. I tried to prove myself. A purse bulged in the pocket of the one nearest the fire, big as a satchel to me. I crept close enough to smell him, old mud, stale meat, and something sour that might have been his soul, and slipped my fingers toward the prize. The purse squeaked. Not creaked, spoke in a rude little voice like a latch with opinions. "Somebody's trying to pinch me," it squealed. That was the end of stealth. A great hand clamped around my wrist like a trap. The troll lifted me off the ground as easily as a chicken and squinted at me with small, cool eyes. "What's this, then?" he rumbled. "A little 'un," said another, leaning in. "A snack." "A thief," the first decided, squeezing until my bones complained. They argued about me the way men argue about dinner. Roast, boil, skin. I swung in the troll's fist, feet kicking uselessly, heat from the fire licking at my toes. In my panic, I did the worst possible thing. "I'm not alone," I blurted. 3 troll heads turned at once. "Oh," said one, delighted. "Got friends, has he?" And just like that, my foolish mouth became a net tightening around all of us. They threw a sack over my head. The world became damp cloth and rank smell and darkness. I heard their laughter, stones grinding together. I sat with my wrists aching and my heart hammering, and the terrible certainty that I had just dragged 13 dwarves into a stew pot because I wanted to be thought useful. Minutes later, another sack thumped down nearby. Balin, if I had to guess, because even muffled, his curses had the dignity of an elder. Then another. Then another. One by one, the dwarves stumbled into the trap, each captured, each voice turning from confidence to anger to fear. Thorin's fury came through burlap like steam through a kettle spout. The trolls talked about us as if we were meat already. "Well," said one, "we could roast 'em." "Roasting's messy," said another. "Gets stuck in your teeth." "Boil 'em," said the third, practical as a butcher. "Boil solves everything." "Boil makes it soggy," the second complained. "I don't like soggy." "Then don't eat it wet," the third. "Let it dry after." "That's just roasting with extra steps," the second argued. "Nothing wrong with extra steps," said the first. "Extra steps makes you feel like you worked for it." I hated myself with a purity that surprised me. Time dragged, the way time does when you are waiting to be eaten. The fire popped and the trolls bickered, endlessly, stupidly, about what to do with us, about whether dwarves taste better roasted or boiled, about whether hobbits are worth the trouble of chewing. Then a new voice joined the argument. Thin, sly, far too clever to belong to any troll. "If you eat 'em now," the voice said, "you'll have 'em stuck in your teeth for a week." "Stuck," grunted one troll. "Aye," said the voice. Dwarves is all bones and gristle. Better boil 'em. Boil 'em? What'd you take us for? Cooks? If you roast 'em, the sly voice went on, you'll burn the outside and the inside'll still be shouting at you. Dwarves don't shout when they're dead, said a third troll, offended by the very notion. Oh, they do, the voice replied. They shout out their teeth. For a heartbeat, the trolls fell quiet. And in that heartbeat, huddled in my sack, I understood so sharply it almost hurt. Gandalf. He was back. He was hidden. And he was doing what he did best, not flinging fire, not cracking stone with spells, but turning stupid creatures against themselves with a few well-aimed words. He wasn't trying to defeat them by force, he was trying to keep them talking. Keep them there. Keep them squabbling while the sky did what the sky always does. Because trolls, these trolls at least, had an old weakness. I'd heard it in stories so often it had become a comfortable lie. Daylight turns them to stone. I couldn't see the east from inside that sack, but I could feel time moving. The long drag of it. The thinning of night at the edges if you only wait long enough. Fear shifted into something else. Thin, sharp, almost a kind of gallows cheer that rises when the noose is already around your neck and you might as well admire the knot. And terror does odd things to the mouth, so I joined in. From inside my sack, I made my voice as muffled and trollish as a hobbit can manage, and shouted, "Boil 'em! 2 days at least! Dwarves is tough!" The world went still. "Who said that?" snapped a troll. "Bert!" accused another at once. "Wasn't me!" Bert roared. "I'm here!" "Well, someone said it!" the third barked. "Someone's talking about dwarves being tough!" Gandalf's unseen voice slid in, mild as poison. "Bert talks a lot. Talks when he eats, talks when he sleeps, talks to sacks sometimes." "I do not talk to sacks!" Bert howled. "Oh, you do," said another troll, delighted now. He does! I heard him. Told a sack once it had nice stitchin'." "That was you!" Bert shouted. "That was William," the other insisted, pointing. William's temper flared. "Don't point at me, you great lump!" "Don't call me lump, you sack talker! I don't talk to sacks!" "You do! Gandalf, relentless, tossed in another log of nonsense. "If you haven't got patience, sit on 'em." "Sit on 'em?" one troll repeated, suddenly pleased with himself. "Aye," Gandalf said. "Sit on dwarves till they turn to jelly, soft as pudding." Now I could not stop myself. "Aye!" I shouted from the sack. "Sit on 'em till their beards come off. Dwarves is all gristle. You'll break your teeth roastin'." Trolls erupted. "Ah, you hear that?" Tom crowed. "Even the sacks is agreeing with me." "Means you're talking to sacks again," William snapped. "I'm not talking. They're talking to me. That's what talking is." "Well, I don't like it." "Then stop listening." "I can't stop listening. It's rude." "Rude? You're a troll." "A troll can be polite." "Not you." The trolls erupted. They argued the minutes away. They argued the hour away. They argued pridefully, stupidly, like men determined to lose a race by refusing to walk. All the while, the world beyond the sack grew paler. At some point, the trolls' voices changed. Less confident now, more uneasy. "Feels early," muttered one. "Ain't early," snapped another, but his voice was thinner. Then a strange hush fell, as if even the rain paused to watch. The first blade of sunlight crested the hill. It struck the clearing like judgment. The trolls' voices cut off mid-insult. Their hands froze mid-gesture. One moment they were living gluttons full of argument and appetite. Next, they were stone, locked forever in the act of being wrong. Silence fell so hard I could hear my own breath. The sack was cut away. Damp air hit my face like freedom. Gandalf stood there at last, calm as if he'd merely stepped out to fetch herbs. "Well," he said, brushing rainwater from his sleeve, "that was a long discussion about cooking for folk who don't own a pot." The dwarves stumbled free one by one, coughing, swearing, rubbing wrists, glaring murder at the stone trolls as if glare could finish what sunlight began. Thorin's face looked like thunder that had learned manners, but even thunder knows when to be grateful. My knees shook. I tried to stand tall anyway and managed something like a wobble. Gandalf's eyes flicked to me. Not soft, not sentimental, just amused in that infuriating way of his, as if he had always known I'd start shouting cooking advice from inside a sack. "Next time," he said quietly, "try not to introduce yourself with, 'I'm not alone.'" "I didn't introduce myself," I muttered. I panicked. "Much the same," he said. When the shaking eased, I noticed something glinting on the ground. Iron. Old. Heavy. A key. It lay in the wet grass as if the world had dropped it there on purpose. I picked it up. Cold bit my palm. Gandalf's gaze sharpened. "That," he said, "is not a kitchen key." We followed the troll's tracks to a hill nearby. There was a low, dark opening, half hidden by brush, a big stone door that looked like it had been shoved there by a careless giant. The key fit with a satisfying finality, and the door grudgingly gave way. Inside was the troll's hoard. Not dragon gold, not the shining song stuff. Troll plunder. Coins, trinkets, tools, bits of armor, odd little treasures stolen from travelers who had not been clever enough or lucky enough to see another sunrise. There were provisions, too. Sacks of flour, strings of dried meat, barrels with promise in them. The sight of food made every stomach in the company speak at once. The dwarves descended on it with the focus of men who have been hungry for too long. Then they began to argue, because dwarves, even when saved from being eaten, will find time to quarrel about gold. "We take it," said one. "We take all of it," said another. "With what hands?" Balin asked, practical as ever. "With what ponies? We've already fed the river." "I could carry a fair bit in your beard," muttered someone, and there was a snort of laughter that sounded half like relief. Thorin stood among the treasure like a man in a room full of ghosts. His eyes did not glitter the way the others did. His eyes remembered. Loss. Hunger. A homeland out of reach. Gold is not only gold to dwarves. It is proof that something was theirs once. "It is ours," he said, flat as a hammer stroke. Gandalf let that sit a moment. Then he spoke like a man explaining a simple truth to children. "We bury what we cannot carry," he said. "Mark it. Take what you need now. Claim the rest on the way back. Alive. Unless you'd prefer to jingle across the wild like a walking coin purse and invite every thief within 10 miles to introduce himself." "Thieves?" said Nori, offended. "Who would rob us?" Gandalf looked at him. "Nori." Nori blinked. "Fair." That argument they understood. So we chose what we could use at once. Food, a few practical items, and some lighter valuables, and buried the rest deep under earth and stone. We tamped the ground down, hid the place as best we could, and marked it in small ways meant only for our eyes. It felt oddly comforting. covering gold with dirt, as if we were planting a promise and daring the world to steal it back. It was then we found the swords. Not troll knives, not crude iron. These were fine blades, with scabbards that still held beauty, jewelled hilts that caught the dim light and threw it back cold and clean. Old work. Elvish, Gandalf said at once, and in his voice there was the faintest note of respect, like a man recognizing the handwriting of a dead master. He chose one for himself with an ease that made it seem the sword had been waiting for him in particular. Thorin took the other. His hand closed around the hilt as if he were remembering how it felt to be armed in a world that wanted him small. I found my own blade last, a smaller sword that would have been a toothpick to a troll, but to me it was a proper weapon, light enough to lift without shame, sharp enough to quicken my pulse. A sword in a hobbit's hand does not make him taller. It does not grant courage as if courage were a cloak you can borrow. But it does make the world feel less one-sided. Gandalf watched me weighing it in my grip. "Keep it," he said. "You'll want something between you and the dark, when the dark decides it's hungry." I swallowed. "Does it have a name?" "Names come," he said, "often after you've earned them." Then he held his own blade up, turning it so the light caught along the length of the metal like a thin stream of winter water. "Imagine," he said, "made for wars that were fought underground, wars where daylight was a rumour and goblins were not nuisances, but armies." I frowned. "Goblins?" "Orcs," he said. "Goblins, call them what you like. When they are near, blades like these can tell you." "How?" "They glow," Gandalf said simply. "A cold blue, a warning you can't mistake." I stared at him. "They shine." "Not for beauty," he said. "For survival." I looked down at my own blade. It did not glow now. It only sat there, cold and honest as truth. "What if they're close?" I asked. "Then you'll know," Gandalf said, and the corner of his mouth twitched. "And if you're wise, you'll stop walking into dark places with nothing but hope in your pocket." It was pointed. It was deserved. I felt my ears burn. I ran my thumb along the flat of the blade, careful because I have learned something about sharp things already, and felt the steadiness of its weight. It needed a name. Not a grand name, no sweeping title fit for songs. This was not a king's sword. It was a small blade for small hands, made for close work and desperate moments. For my size, the best weapon was not grandeur. It was pain. "I'll call it," I began. Thorin made a noise that might have been a snort. A hobbit naming a sword. I surprised myself with a flash of temper. "You name mountains, you name hammers, you name yourselves things like Oakenshield, as if you're waiting to be carved into stories." A few dwarves laughed at that, quick, sharp, relief laughter. Thorin's eyes narrowed, but he did not forbid me. Gandalf only watched, amused and very still, like a man waiting to see whether a seed sprouts. I looked at the blade again, imagining it catching blue light in a tunnel, imagining it warning me of teeth in the dark. A small thing, but sharp. A sting. "Sting," I said. The word felt right as soon as it left my mouth, simple and honest, and a little wicked. Gandalf nodded once. "A good name for a small blade," he said. "Small things often decide the larger ones." I slid it into its sheath and felt, absurdly, like I had done something permanent. We ate what we could, drank what we could, and slept in the daylight like men who had been carried too far and only just set down. When we woke, the rain had eased into a damp mist and the world looked washed clean of colour. We left the Troll's Hill behind, 3 stone figures still frozen in eternal argument, and the buried gold sleeping under earth like a secret. Thorin rode up beside Gandalf at last, his voice tight with everything he did not like saying. "Where were you?" he demanded. Gandalf's gaze slid toward the road ahead, toward the wide country that did not care about our quarrels. "I went ahead to scout," he said. "I met some of Lord Elrond's folk on the way, friends, who warned me trolls had come down from the mountains." He said it mildly, but I heard the meaning under it. He had known danger waited. He had let us step into it anyway. Because there are lessons a person only learns with a sack over his head and the smell of roasting mutton in the air. And because survival, like any craft, is built out of mistakes you live through. I rode on with my new sword at my side, the name of it sitting in my mind like a secret taste. Sting.